Hello and welcome to Motivated Learning, presented by Visual Learning Solutions. I am your host, Buddy Broyles. Motivated Learning is a program created for the education and learning design community to raise awareness about the people and the reason for quality professional education training. We are excited to kick off Season 2, which is now on both LinkedIn Live and Facebook on Visual Learning Solutions on those platforms. As this show is live, please be prepared to post any questions for our guests in the chat section as we will discuss them later in the program. Today I'm very excited to welcome Keith Kannenberg, owner of the Kannenberg Group. Keith has a long history leading both for-profit and nonprofit organizations. His leadership experience stretches across the fields of educational institutions, real estate, ministry, healthcare, and corporate and industrial training. Keith, welcome to the show. How are you today, sir?
I'm doing well, buddy. How are you? Thank you for having me.
Glad to see you. Well, let's start off by tell us a little bit about your history and yourself.
Well, I've had a pretty eclectic lifestyle. My background's kind of started years ago started out as a truck driver. I drove for a lot of years and kind of got out and saw things from that perspective and just enjoyed it like that. And then later on got into ministry, spent quite a long time in ministry doing some ministry things, and then got off into academics and started pursuing some advanced degrees and moved into some leadership degrees, did some research in that area, got off into a bunch of different fields, started a couple businesses, had some real estate ventures, a lot of different things, and just developed this tremendous passion for leadership and uniting leadership with organizational structures. And that's become a big part of my world and a big part of my research and a big part of my passions. So that's kind of me in a nutshell. Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Well, obviously you founded the Kannenberg Group. So tell us a little bit about your business and your business goals.
Okay, so what we've done is, the Cannonball Group started out from that passion for leadership, and like I said, my research kind of got me into looking at organizational structures, and I've always kind of been a bit of I've been a bit interested in different various types of organizational structures. I've seen structures kind of be hierarchical. I've seen them kind of flatten out. I've seen them running matrices, things like that. And I've always been interested by companies that experimented with different structures. And I've watched leaders, and I've watched leaders try to navigate those waters in those organizations. And I've watched some really good people do great in certain organizations and then change and find themselves floundering by applying the same principles to a different company or a different organization. And that kind of just set me out on a path to try to figure out why. And I was kind of just searching for that. And that led me to develop some leadership training courses, and just saw that continuity that was going and between structure and stylings, and just over a period of years just developed a method that I found that really seems to work. And it's starting to take off, and I'm really excited about the direction the organization is going in. So.
That's excellent. You mentioned your why, and that's what this show is really about, is what motivates us to drive the industry and to lead, in your case, lead leaders. So tell me a little bit about that. I mean, obviously you identified a problem and are working toward that with the Kannenberg Group, but what are your personal motivations, like your personal mantras, the things that keep you moving and leading others to success?
Yeah, I think leadership is essential, and it just has to happen. And I think we've really confused management and leadership. And management is necessary, but leadership is essential. And a lot of organizations are managing their people. A lot of leaders are managing their people, but only a few are leading. And I see certain companies that seem to really get this, ingrained in their thinking, in their corporate dynamics, and in their corporate culture. And you'll see these companies wherever you go. Like, I can think of some restaurant chains, not to mention any names or anything, but there's a certain restaurant chain that I go into, and I know when I go in there, I'm going to get consistency. I can go into one of those restaurants here in North Carolina. I can go to one down at your home in Texas. I could go to the one out in California. I know I'm always going to get the same consistency when I walk into that place. There's other institutions or other, food places, restaurants where, I walk in and I actually like the food better, but I never know what I'm going to experience when I walk in that door. And sometimes I get great leadership and great service, and sometimes I get horrible service. And I've often asked myself, why is that? And I think it's because this one particular company just constantly reaches out there and does aligns their corporate structure to their leadership stylings. And it just seems to work like that. So that's been something that's always driven me. And I've said, I want to find that and kind of figure out a way to make that connection and to give that to other people. I'd like to see that connection, because I just don't see it happening anywhere else,
Well, you mentioned the structuring. So, there's a relationship, as you've described, between leadership practices and how the customer is experienced. So tell us a little bit more about the relationship between the leadership, the practices that they've been put in place, and the structuring itself, and why that's so significant in today's world.
Yeah, I think anytime somebody asks me that question, Buddy, I kind of relate it to auto racing, and it's going to sound like I'm kind of going off on a tangent here, but I watch auto racing and I see that any point in a race, here in North Carolina, we're big in NASCAR, and there's like a ton of NASCAR around here, and you watch it and they'll race 500 miles, they'll race 600 miles, and you're watching that thing for hours. And at any point in time, there might be multiple leaders out there on the track. There might be multiple people that are in the front. And if you take an analysis of what's going on at that moment, you're going to look at that leader and you're going to be able to say all these wonderful things about that leader, right? But it's not about getting out in front. Leadership isn't about getting out in front. It's about taking you across the line, right? And, and sometimes you'll see like a car will be driving along, and then all of a sudden the driver loses control, it hits the wall, and they run on down there. The nice thing about auto racing is you can go down there, you can do a post-crash analysis, you can try to figure out what was going on. Was this driver error? Was this, a mechanical problem? Was it a tire? Whatever it might be. But in leadership, we don't do that. In leadership, we just look at the leader. And if the leader hits the wall, if he or she crashes or burns, we just point our finger and say, bad leader, right? And as I've kind of looked at it, I think sometimes when you have the organizational structure here and you have the leadership styling over here, those things need to pair on top of each other, and you need to be able to make sure that they're actually working in harmony together. And just try to figure out, we try to come in and assess what's going on to figure out, are we applying the right leadership style to this organizational structure and in the right level of the organizational structure? So it's all about kind of coming in, doing a deep analysis instead of just going out and giving, people the soup du jour of the latest leadership trends, because there's all kinds of great leadership stylings out there. You've heard a lot about, servant leadership. We've heard a lot about, transformational leadership, adaptive leadership. There's just a ton of stylings out there, and they're all good, and they're all, they all have merit. But if you apply that wrong styling into the wrong structure, like if you were to take a servant leadership type styling and to put it in a very strict hierarchical organizational structure, the leader, him or herself, might incur a lot of damages. They might work really well for a short period of time, but eventually they're going to hit the wall. And then the organization goes, well, that leader messed up. It might not be the leader that messed up. It might be that the structuring didn't accommodate that leader. And we see a leader crash and burn. And what if we could get a hold of that beforehand and not lose that talent, right? If we actually had a plan that put the styling and the structure together, and then we have, employee engagement, we reduce employee turnover, we reduce profits, increase profits, reduce losses. It can be exponential. For the company if they start to think like that.
Well, you have a long history in studying this and implementing and helping leaders with different companies. So that has given you an insight that a lot of people don't have about how organizations evolve. So tell me a little bit about what you've discovered about the evolution of organizations, and especially how does that apply to the future of leadership training?
I'm glad you asked that, Buddy, because there is, I've kind of discovered in my reading and stuff, and that there is an evolution of thinking that happens in organizations that a lot of people don't realize. And a lot of companies, when they start out, they have to think a certain way, but 20 years from now, they have to think a different way because their whole world changed. So at the very beginning, they end up, thinking very Spartan-like. They have to trim down. They have to make quick decisions. They have to be very agile and function like that. And a lot of that mindset is about survival, right? And so there's a whole different type of leadership styling that needs to be applied when you're in a survival mindset and in a survival structuring. And there's certain organizational structures that fit well in a survival type of thinking. And then, a next step up from that is kind of like a kinship type mindset where it's all about relationships and networking and all of those things. Well, when the organization starts to move into that next phase of thinking, it needs to really look at its structuring to see if their structuring is going to accommodate their new thought processes. And then they have to look at their leadership and make sure it aligns there. And then when it makes another jump, it'll jump from there, and it will go. And a lot of times it ends up into a place where there's it's about power, it's about control, it's about influence. And that's kind of sounds like a negative term, but it can be a positive term for some people, and you just have to look at the situation. Once again, structuring changes, organizational leadership changes, and there's like a whole series of thoughts. I think we've come up with like 8 of these series of thought processes that change, and the adaptations, and it passes all the way up until it gets to a point where it kind of starts to deal, where a company gets to the point where they start to deal with, the chaos of the world around them. And we live in a very chaotic time, right?
Yes,
so,
yeah.
And it's amazing that so many companies fail because they get to the point where their organization is facing the chaos of the times, and they can't adapt to it, and the organizations fall apart. So I could go on and on and on about all the different processes that people's thinking goes through and structuring and all that, but that's the depth of the research and the analysis.
Right. So you mentioned, how volatile a lot of organizations are right now, from business operations, especially to training and educating a changing workforce, whether it was change or not. And of course, we have people that want to continue to work from home, and they're even leaving organizations to stay there. So there's a lot of change in organizational structuring that is happening. So a phrase you would give me is a momentous leap, and the new science. Talk to me about how what's the change that's happening now, and how we and leaders can accommodate the new science that is replacing the older order of things, especially in this COVID environment, which is ongoing from my vantage point.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that question as well. I want to preface that question with this statement, though. Some of the things that I'm speaking about aren't things that I've come up with on my own. A lot of great researchers have figured this stuff out ahead of time. Beck and Cowan came up with this thing called spiral dynamics, and a lot of that stuff speaks about that. And then there's a woman named Meg Wheatley who is a professor up at Harvard University, and she teaches organizational leadership, and she's kind of made that connection between the new sciences. And so a lot of the verbiage that I'm about to say, I am borrowing from people whose minds are far greater than mine. But what they speak about is that we live in this world right now that's changing so quickly. Like I have this picture that somebody gave me one time of New York City street, and it's I think it's in like 1908, and there's like just nothing but horse and buggies out on the street. And then about like 10-15 years later, they show the same street from the same view, and it's all cars, right? And when you look at it, the world changed so much in 15 years. And some people tried to hold on to the horse and buggy world, and their businesses tanked. And other people got into that adaptive world, and they made the adaptations. Well, you look through it, there's so many different things that have changed over the years. My grandfather was born in 1901, died in 1985. And I think to myself, how many changes did this man see? He went from a bath and a path to a bath and a half, right? And he saw electricity come in, he saw the automobile, he saw the airplane, he saw jet engines, he saw rocket ships, he saw a man on the moon, he saw microwave ovens. How much change happens in our lifetime? And now here we're hit with the internet, we're hit with this global world, and there's so much what we call chaos around us. And we look at stuff and things change, and we're like, oh, things are changing. And we get kind of wigged out, and we're like, my business got destroyed because of COVID. Well, if your business got destroyed because of COVID, it's because you didn't adapt to COVID, right? There are other people that have made billions of dollars because of COVID. And they adapted to it. They had themselves set for it. They had this adaptive mindset, and they watched what was going on, and then they didn't hesitate, and they came and they made the changes and the adjustments to capitalize on the changes in the world. You can't do that if your workforce is rigid. So you have to have a workforce and a leadership base that understands adaptivity and that understands chaos, that says, hey, chaos is this exciting thing. And that's the momentous leap that we're in right now. We're going from this old rigid structure, right? This old science, this old Newtonian science, to this quantum physics, quantum leap, where we used to look at that stuff and say it was total chaos. But a lot of these new science researchers are looking at quantum physics, and they're saying it might appear to be chaos, but it's really order masquerading as disorder. And that's what the internet did to us. That's what COVID has done to us. COVID wasn't disorder. 9/11 wasn't disorder. I mean, it was horrible, but it wasn't disorder because there was a whole mass of order that came behind it. And only the people that are willing to have an adaptive leadership style and can take and move with the flow of organizational structural changing and leadership styling changing, and have a plan. You make a plan and then you work the plan. And that's what I've kind of become very passionate about, is about helping people get themselves into a place where they can make a plan and work a plan. Does that make sense?
It certainly does. So real quick, if people want to continue this conversation with you, let's look at different ways that they can reach out to you. I know that they can email you in a couple different ways there, and find you on LinkedIn and call. And of course, your website, I believe, Keith, is it the Kannenberg? Tell me your website real quick. I think it's the same.
It's the Cannonball Group.org. right? www.thecannonberggroup.org, and you can go out there and check us out a little bit. And I'd love to talk with people. I talk to people every day. It's my favorite thing to do. So I'd love to talk with you. So
Terrific.
go.
Terrific.
Yeah.
Well, and obviously you have a storied career, a great history in all these different industries. So, my last question is: do you have any comments or advice for someone coming into this industry now, and different things that they can do to better themselves, regardless of the chaotic environment that we have?
Yeah, I would say
give them some advice.
Yeah, I would say, this is a wide open world. And the majority of people that are in this industry right now are trying to create rigid structures. And they are they create like cookie cutter training, and they create soup du jour leadership stylings, and then they run out there and then they try and sell and market their teachings and their trainings. I would suggest to somebody, if you really wanted to move in an adaptive world in a chaotic environment in which we live, if you could learn to teach people how to in leadership, get on the balcony and observe what's going on, and then teach them how to formulate a structure, a plan, and then teach them how to take that down onto the dance floor and teach other people how to dance the dance while that song is still playing, and then teach people how to keep their ears attuned to when the song is changing, and then teach them how to run back up to the balcony and start observing what's happening and reformulate again and adapt and get back down there on the dance floor. Times are changing too quickly for us to create cookie cutter leadership programs. We have to get to the heart of the leader, and not it's more about the why of leadership than the how of leadership. And I would strongly advise people getting into this to not get so focused on the how, get right to the core and get to the why.
Well said. Thank you so much for joining me today, Keith. Great talking to you.
Thank you.
Very good. And the rest of you, please reach out if you have any questions about this show using the social media available on your screen. Of course, you can reach out to us on both of our Facebook and our LinkedIn page at Visual Learning Solutions. Follow us on Twitter. We're happy to take a phone call, and email us if you have any questions or you want to follow up. And of course, you saw the information earlier how to reach Keith. So a little bit about Visual Learning Solutions. We provide services such as instructional design, e-learning, instructional course development, and so much more, including video production, both in a studio setting like we have here in Frisco, or out in the field, such as your corporate location or event center. Also, if you wish to host a show similar to this one like I am now, we can definitely help you, from developing the concept to set and show design, along with full production and marketing of your product. So thanks again for watching, and we hope you will tune in or even consider joining us as a guest on this show. Have a wonderful day, and thanks for joining us.